Thank you so much for having me, Linda. Really means a lot to be here today. And thank you for the kind introduction. Really, again, just appreciate that so much. So thank you. And I'm excited to see everybody here. I was looking through where we're all from, and we've got a lot of people from all over the place. So I'm excited about that. We're not all in Florida like me. We're all kind of all over the place. Is it still cold anywhere? Anyone want to raise their hand? Just show me. Is it still cold where anyone is? We got Jason, we got Janae, we got Larry. Okay. So apparently it's cold in some places still. I was outside today getting some sun during lunch. It was beautiful. Anyway, happy to be here with everybody today. As you probably got from the introduction here with Linda, is that everything I do is podcasting. So that's my life through and through. Like that's what I've devoted my full time and attention to. And what I want to talk to you about today is some monetization ideas that are more unconventional, if you will. Again, I have nothing against ads and sponsorships. Just there's a lot of material about that already, and I'm not really the most well-versed in it. So I'll kind of stay in my lane, which is there are some unconventional other ways to monetize. So I'll talk through this, and then definitely want to make sure there's some time that we can discuss and talk about some other ideas as well, because I'll tell you what, anytime I'm in a room with people that are podcasters or wanting to be podcasters, I learn something. So I probably don't have the best information we'll hear here today. Someone else might, which I'm really excited about. But the first thing I'm going to share before I get into all the monetization things is that I wore this shirt on purpose. It says the words "lead with value" on it. What's so important is we can't just think, how do I squeeze every possible dollar out of any listener I possibly can? How do I maximize my profit? Those are all good things and things we should ask, but not before how do I make sure that I'm leading with value? How do I make sure I'm serving somebody who's listening on the other end? At the end of the day, podcasting in my mind is about serving somebody. If you look at some of the data in podcasting, which is always changing, so forgive me if this is slightly outdated because I looked a week ago. But last I checked, Edison Research did a poll with podcast listeners asking them, I don't know how many thousands of people it was, but why they listen to podcasts. And over 75% of them said to learn something new. And because of that, I'm going to give you like the secret to podcasting. This is a bonus here. Podcasting is about transformation. When somebody starts listening, what they want is a transformation in their life. Now, if you have a comedy podcast, true crime, they're looking to laugh. That's a transformation they want. They want more happiness or joy in their life. If it's something like true crime, they're looking to get into a deeper story arc, something can get their mind thinking, right? If you're doing an interview show that's purely educational, they're able to be educated and again, learn something from it. If that many people are listening to podcasts to actually learn and implement something new in their life, they're looking for transformation. And our primary objectives as creators has to be to lead with value, to serve those people in that transformation they're looking for. And I'm a firm believer that happens just one listener at a time. It's not going to happen at the masses and things like that. And it might, but at the end of the day, if we ever lose the perspective, I'm doing this for the one person who needs me most, I think our value begins to diminish. And so the way I always say is I do for one every day what I wish I could do for all. I wish that this talk today would be impactful for everyone in this room. Chances are there's probably one person who really needs to hear what I'm going to share today. But you know what? That's okay. If I can impact the one life today that I'm supposed to impact, then tomorrow I'll do it again. I'll do my best every single day. So again, I want to make sure I start off with that because we're going to talk about monetization, but monetization should be our focus and our almost award, if you will, for the value that we're adding and the way we're showing and serving people. And so for a lot of us, when we think monetization, we immediately think, how do I get money? What do I do? What do I do? Right? It should be natural. It should be organic. It should be an extension of the value you're already adding. Somebody listening says, you know what? I really enjoy Lindsay a lot because Lindsay's using that Rodecaster Pro, even though it's not the new one, it's the old one. We talked before we got started. Sorry. But the point is they might say, you know what else does Lindsay have? Because I'm so curious. That's when you've earned the opportunity to monetize in a way that, again, is going to serve and add a lot of value. So I'm going to go through some ideas here, and I encourage you all to take notes. And again, I'm going to follow Linda's lead here on when we can ask questions and stuff like that. But I want to make sure that happens. Linda, I don't know if is it best to do that at the end? Do you like to do it during? Okay? So which is
whenever it feels right to you, Alex. Please stop and open it up. Meanwhile, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to add them to the chat. And Alex doesn't have to keep track of the chat. I will for him. So you're welcome to add anything into the chat. And then during breaks, we'll go through the questions.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it. By the way, Leadership Global is I know it's Lead Hership Global, but I've personally learned so much from Linda and from the organization that some of the nicest people I've ever met have come through it. So it's seriously an honor to be here. I could not be more thrilled about this. Anyway, here I am. I digress. We're going to get into it now. So I encourage you to take notes. If you do have questions, and thanks, Linda, for the permission to kind of do that along the way, use the reactions. And I think there's like a way to raise your hand. Yeah, raise hand in the reactions button. And then that way I can just call on you when I get to like a quick stopping point. We can kind of do it that way. Because what I don't want to have happen is me be like on my first point and you wait 40 minutes to ask me a question because you're like, I'm not even sure what it was about, right? Let's keep it all in context and stuff like that. So the very first thing I'm going to mention here is, again, is to make sure we're thinking from the idea of like the value that I'm adding. And I think it should be somewhat coherent, which means the monetization strategy you implement should work with the value that you add. And so I'm just going to go through a few of these because there's so many different types of shows and ways that we all serve, right? The first one I'm going to mention here is to offer a skip the line option. And what this means is if you have a interview style podcast and somebody wants to come on and they seem like a great guest and it turns out they have a book that comes out in 3 weeks. I don't know about you, but my podcast in 3 weeks from now is done and scheduled and ready, right? And when someone's like, is there any chance it can come out the day that my book comes out? The answer, historically speaking, has always been no, it can come out 4 months after that though, right? And they're like, oh, okay, I need something that's going to come out that day. And so what I've come up with is I just call a skip the line option, which simply means, hey, listen, you've got this book coming out. We definitely want to get you on, but I'm gonna have to mix up all of my production. I'm gonna have to add an extra episode. You're gonna have to rush on this. And that's going to have a lot of extra costs for me. If you're interested, we can build out some additional assets. We can do some additional marketing around it. We can work together on this, but you're going to have to help me cover the costs. And your time needs to be included in that. And I find that this skip the line option works best if you don't do it like automatically. Some things can be automated, but I find it lacks a little bit of authenticity if you're telling everybody, hey, skip the line option, click here and buy now, right? But it's more so, hey, you know what? I think this is going to be a really good episode. I think that we should work together on it. If it makes sense, I can send you over an invoice through something like PayPal, right? Again, the more organic and natural it feels, the better you're going to convert that. The more it feels like big corporate, like, hey, skip the line now. You can do it, let's skip the line together. You can click here, you can pay it there, do all that. It doesn't feel, again, as authentic, and you want it to feel that way. So again, if you're having a lot of guests and a lot of traction on your show, which many of us hit at some point where you start getting a lot of people, I don't recommend just saying, hey, guest, I'm charging you. No, have it still. I don't think it should be paid. Like, I think you can just let it kind of happen, right? But when somebody says this needs to be out now, give them the option of saying, hey, together we can do that. We can even, my episodes come out on Tuesday, but your book comes out on a Thursday. Let's release this on a Thursday, and I have to just change my production. It's going to take a little bit of cost. Again, that's a great way to monetize if you're doing interviews. And as your show grows, you may start having a lot of people really interested in that. And you do it from a place of like, let's work together on this, not like, let me just charge you and try to get money out of you, right? And that bonus may do really well for two reasons. One, if it comes out on a different day, your listeners might be like, oh, shoot, I've actually never seen Jason release an episode on a Thursday, so let me check that out, right? But in addition, if that's coming out when the author is releasing their book, they're doing that and asking you that because they want something to promote with their book. They don't want to just say, here's the book. They want to say, here's a podcast I was on about the book. So it's going to give them the chance to also get out there and share about your show, which should organically bring their audience to you, because this is an announcement of a book is huge, right? So think about it that way. It may actually grow the show as well. So that's the first thing that I want to mention there. And Kelly, this is a great question. But I was just getting to this. What to charge? Thank you for asking that, Kelly. What to charge is always different depending on who your audience is, who it is you're serving, and it's really hard to know that. What I will say is do not undervalue yourself. Think about how much time your podcast takes. So again, if it's like super highly produced and it's like it's spending 12 hours of editing through a team, or you do 50 different assets for it, you're going to charge something different to someone who just says, cool, done, run this script, post, it's live now, right? Like that charge is going to be different based off of those things. So you want to be able to think about, okay, what is it that I'm actually doing here? What is my time worth in this? What do I think is fair? And also the type of guest you're getting. Here's the thing. I had a guest on my show who wanted to do this, and he works for, it's probably okay for me to say this, Franklin Covey Corporation, and big $100+ million organization, right? Like they're giant. And I told him how much it was, and he goes, are you kidding me? I was like, no. He goes, dude, I can't take that number seriously. And I was like, is it too much or too little? Like realistically, I was like, I don't actually know what he's saying here. And he goes, dude, you need to add a zero to that, or I can't even send that to a budget team because they're gonna laugh that I even brought it to them. And I was like, okay, plus a zero. And he's like, cool, deal. That works. Right. So I'm not telling you to charge more based off of who it is, but if that is your typical client who comes on, or your typical guest, sorry, not client, your typical guest who comes on, keep that in mind. It's got to make sense in their head as something that can be taken seriously. Because if you're just talking to small indie people that are like, hey, it's my first book, I don't have any audience, I don't really have any cash, I did this whole thing self-published, and you tell them, hey, it's going to take me 4 hours, I need a couple $100 for it, they might be fine with that, right? And that might work or might be too much. And so I'm not saying always adjust it, but you have to really know who the guest is, what work you're putting into it, and what your time is worth. And unfortunately, we don't have time to unpack all that here. And I'm not really a leading expert in that as well, I will say. You will need to talk to a coach that can help you figure out what is that your time really worth. And Linda's probably a lot better at that than I am. Maybe you'll bring her on at some point. So anyway, so that was a good point. Any other questions on that before I move on to the next one here? This is my excuse to get some water real quick. Okay. So we just talked about skipping the line, right? Giving that option to your guests. The next one is going along that same line is to offer a marketing boost. So to offer a marketing boost. And what this means is, again, with your guest who comes on your show, I recommend only doing this if the episode is really good, first off. Let me just say that. So if the episode is really good and you're like, man, I wish everyone who's in my niche could hear this, that's the one that you want to do this marketing boost idea with. And what that means is you're done with the episode and you say, Junaid, you have the coolest setup I've ever seen in my life. It's incredible, which is totally true, by the way. But you say that and you're like, this episode was so good, I want to get it in front of more people. We've got to get in front of more people. You talked about your business on helping people set up their home studios. I think it's going to do really well with my listeners and hopefully even more people than that. Would you be interested in doing a marketing boost together? And what that means is saying, let's throw some ad dollars at this. Let's actually build out some assets that we promote on social media together. Junaid, I'm going to be the one to set it up. I'm going to keep 30% for myself because it's going to take me a lot of time and energy to do this. But do you have a budget you'd like to throw at this? You might find some people will be like, you know what? I've got some money at this. And I've got a friend and he, somebody dropped $100 with him to do this. And now it did so well and converted so well that I don't know how much they do now, but for a little bit, they were doing $1 a day on social media and it was bringing 10, 15 people to the podcast. So the bonus is it brings a little bit of revenue and that one's not a lot, right? But it does grow the podcast as well. So if the episode's really good, offer this marketing boost idea. And again, like the last one, y'all are going to hear this trend, make it feel natural and organic. Don't make it be an automatic email the second it's done and basically say, Sarah, great time today. Thanks for being here. Hey, if you'd like to market this podcast episode with me, click here and you can pay the invoice and we'll get it out to more people. No, it should be, hey, I really enjoyed this episode. My listeners are going to love this. How can we get it in front of more people? I've got an idea. I think we can do some sort of marketing campaign together where it'll bring more people. And by the way, you did a great job pitching your own product and service in there. I think it will convert if we throw a little bit of dollars at it. And the thing is, if your guest comes back a month later and be like, you know what? I spent $500 with you to market that and I made 1,000. Tell them, hey, give me 1,000. Let's see if we can make 2,000 for you. Okay, let's see if we can make 3,000 for you, right? A lot of people that know this space really well will throw more at that because they can see the value in it for themselves and the value for the listenership. The big bonus there, once again, is it grows your show at the same time on somebody else's dollar in a way that you're serving together. I love the idea of a marketing boost. And if you're checking this out and you're like, hey, I'm not really sure how to do that, I'm going to drop a link. I should have had this link ready. I'm so sorry I didn't. But Mopod Boost, let me just make sure I got it. They're a company that really automates a lot of this. Mopod.com/ maybe boost.mopod. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Always be prepared. I'm trying to do a good job here for you guys, but I was not quite there. All right. So I'm dropping that link in here, boost.mopod.com. These guys have a really great reputation and you can kind of see exactly how this thing would work right there. You can just go to that page, which open it for now, save it for a later type of thing. But that's a way to do it. If you're like, I have no idea how to run ads, fine. If you do, you can do them yourself. Or I know some people that are really good at running social media ads. So if you need an introduction, just reach out to me and they will crush it. They're so good at it, right? And then again, keep the margin for yourself because that's the way that you can monetize your show. Any questions on this one before we move on here? This is a super smart group, you know, and there's not questions. It means you all are, it means I'm either a really good speaker, y'all are really smart. I think I'm going to lean toward more y'all are really smart, but who knows? We'll see. Um, so the next one here is to keep on the trend of guests here, is to turn your guest into a customer. This is becoming a really popular one. If your show is in some sort of niche where you're able to actually bring on guests that would also be your ideal client because they want the exposure, you can actually convert them. And here's why I say that. So you're not, well, let me go back, let me step back. You're not selling to the listeners, you're selling to the guest. And that right there is like a huge, for me, like when I first heard that, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about who's in the seat right in front of me. I was thinking about who's in the crowd, in the audience. But here's the thing, and here's why I like this idea. If you have a product / service of some sort that you know is great for a certain group of people that also add value to your listeners, bringing them on as guests is a great way to, one, develop that know, like, and trust with somebody. But also think about this. The basis of all friendship, connection is all based on the idea of meaningful experience. And unless you and I have done thousands of podcast interviews or interviews like this, unless we're those people, the rest of us, myself included, this is a meaningful experience. When you've shared this platform with another human being, it's not at the same level, but similar to going like on a hiking adventure together, going whitewater rafting together, right? Like that type of experience, you never forget it. And if somebody is not super well versed in this, again, me being one of those people, this is a meaningful experience. Next time Linda calls me, I am primed and ready to do more business with her. Now, here's the thing. If you bring on that guest and they're like, wow, this was amazing. I've never really gotten to do much of this. What a cool experience. And you're such a good interviewer, by the way. That is your chance to say, hey, by the way, if you're wanting to do more like Junaid, I don't mean to pick on you, but he's a friend of mine. He's in my mastermind, like my inner circle, one of the people I love the most in the world. So I'm gonna pick on Junaid. If I'm like, Junaid, I love your studio. How cool. And like, what a great interview. Junaid now has the opportunity to say, you know what? My full-time job is to help people set up home studios that look like this. Would you be interested in setting up another call in a couple of weeks for 10, 15 minutes to talk about it? I can still say no, but if I really like it and I really like Junaid, I'm not like, well, let me go find someone else who does it. No, now I'm like, absolutely. We have this connection. We're going to be able to do this together. And that's just one of many examples of how that can work. We might be a coach, right? We might be some sort of executive that's doing like teaching other people how to level up as an executive, building accountability groups together. Any of those type of things are going to work if you bring on the guest thinking, you know what, this guest can, number one, serve my audience because that has to be the first thing. But two, they could also be someone that I work with. So think about that. You can make a way to actually convert your guests into customers. Does anybody have any question on that one before I move on? And Linda, you're keeping an eye on the chat, right? Because I have not opened the chat. So, and if anyone does have a question, you can use reactions, raise hand, or unmute along the way. If not,
or add it to the chat and we'll read it throughout.
Yeah, that's true too. Thank you. All right. Somebody did raise their hand.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to digress from your presentation. I don't have any podcasts yet. So could you, at some point, are you going to talk more about guests, like how you get guests, or is that off topic?
It's a little bit off topic, but I will definitely chat with you about that. So you're starting a podcast? Is that what you're saying? Like,
yes.
Oh, congrats. That's exciting. Can't wait to hear all about that. Yeah, I'll share a little bit toward that idea as well then, and I'll jump into that. So I will make a quick little note to circle back on that. Cool. I got that. So we will circle back to that. So thank you for bringing that up and let me know where you're at in your journey. I'm excited to hear what your podcast is. So I'll ask you that in a little bit as well. So cool. And then Larry, hey, how are you? Good to see you, by the way.
Hey, good, Alex. Same here. Listen, great comments so far. Really enjoying it. You know, I love this idea of making your guest your customer. But, you know, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm trying to figure out how do you do that in a way that really is authentic, comes across in a low-key way that you're not, it doesn't sound like a self-serving promotion. It gets uncomfortable, you know, in the context of the conversation. What are some ways that you found that to really make that pitch successful, and then it really does result in a potential sale?
This is going to be my favorite question of the day, just so everyone knows. So, Larry, I don't know if there was prizes that Linda's giving out, but you get one. I love that's such an important point, because the thing is, if we switch to being like sleazy about it, like it just doesn't work and it turns people off and you kill what that meaningful experience was. It's like, let's use the example again, a whitewater rafting adventure at the end of it being like, by the way, I know I covered the cost, but pay up. This was going to cost you something. I didn't tell you that front, right? Like now, like they'll remember the experience and be like, oh man, it was so icky. Like I wish we would have known that up front, right? So it's important to make sure that you like Larry's saying, like you have some authenticity in it. What I have found that when this is actually what one of a sales expert, her name's Alicia, that I trust. She's another person in my mastermind who's just brilliant. She talks about if it's truly a match, then it's not really selling because it just makes so much sense. There's so much alignment. So what you might find is during the interview, okay, this doesn't actually work. Going back to Janae's example, if he's talking to someone that's like, I don't have any money to podcast, and this is probably one of the only ones I'm going to do. The worst thing Janae could do at the end is be like, you need a home studio, because they just pre-disqualified themselves, right? But if they're on the interview and they're like, you know what, I'm going to try to do 100 interviews this year. Now it's not a sales thing anymore. It's now, hey, I've got the solution to what you're looking for, I think. And I'm all about like no pressure sales. Like there might be a place for that, but for me, like I always feel uncomfortable when someone starts trying to sell me like really hard on something. I'm like, man, let me look at this first, like, no, I'm not going to sign right now. So it's just a matter of continuing that relationship and seeing where it can go and even adding additional value after the fact. There's been a lot of people that have done that with me that I now actually work with. And they straight up said, hey, really enjoyed the time. You did mention this, and that's exactly what I do. Do you mind if I just do a free consultation on your personal brand on Facebook? Because you talked about not really knowing how to manage your Facebook. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. End up paying these people later to help me actually do it all because they were just willing to. Again, they led with value and showed me that they cared. And again, when it actually makes sense as a match, then it's not really selling at that point. Does that kind of answer the question, Larry?
Yeah. So look for a shared benefit, shared value.
Correct.
Where you can offer something and then they see it as a natural fit. So then it attracts them toward a potential transaction.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, cool. Great.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to keep on moving here. All right. So I'm going to go to, I'll circle back to some other ideas here, but one I want to jump to real quick to kind of mix it up some variety here is to talk about talking to people who are interested in podcasting. So there's two options here. One is the person who comes on your show or that listens to your show that's like, oh, I really want to start a podcast. You can help them do that. Or if you don't want to help them do that, but you know a little bit more than they do, you can point them in the direction of somebody who actually is like a podcast coach of some sort and just work on affiliate commission with them, right? Saying, hey, I can help you get started, but then I'm going to pass you off to this person who is the person I trust. That way you're not doing like the whole step of the thing, right? And like maybe deviating from what your business is. But you can charge someone for a consultation type call. You can say, hey, listen, how about 30 minutes? I charge, I don't know, $200 for 30 minutes or $100 for 30 minutes to spend with me. I'll run through your whole podcast idea. We can make sure that it's going to be a right fit. And then I can recommend some people that you can work with to actually get all implemented and done. You can easily do that again with a guest who says, oh, I really want to start a podcast, or listeners reach out like, I really want to do some sort of show. That's a great option to be able to monetize. Right with that, another idea is, and I actually did this one by mistake. I learned this one, I should say, is to speak to companies about podcasting. If you are a podcaster, you've done one episode, you know more than anyone who has 0 episodes, believe it or not. And I had a real estate office in my town, Jacksonville, Florida, call. And they said, hey, listen, you seem like you know a lot about podcasting. I'm like, some. And they're like, cool, will you come to our real estate office and talk to all our realtors who are interested in like what podcasting looks like for them as realtors and just kind of give them some stats and some information. I was like, yeah, sure. Like, what do y'all think? And they're like, I don't know. How about $400 for 30 minutes? And I was like, this is like early on my podcasting game. I was like, done. I'll be there. I went, I delivered a lot of value because none of them had any questions. Like the first question I got was like, what is a podcast? I was like, I know the answer. I got it, right? They were all like soft, like little, like just like snowball. Like, here you go. Here's your question, just teeing it all up to make me look like an expert. And the thing is, I left that event with so much good feedback. I didn't do this, but the first thing I thought when I was going home, and this was when I was launching Podmatch, one of my first softwares. But I was thinking, like, you know what? I could hire a virtual assistant, pay them $8 an hour, which is great money for them, and have them reach out to every real estate office in Jacksonville and say, hey, I just delivered a 30-minute presentation on podcasting. Would you and your realtors be interested in learning more about it? I could have done that in the financial industry. I could have done that. That goes all over the place. There's so many places where you can do that same thing, and it's almost sharing the same data. And so like, it's like, man, you could turn that into a business completely by doing that. And here's the thing. I don't want anyone to have imposter syndrome here. So what I'm going to share is when you're teaching somebody about podcasting or anything for that matter, here's the example I like to give. Imagine you're climbing like a really steep mountain, for lack of a better term, and you're on top of this huge boulder, and there's somebody just beneath the boulder who's like, can you help me up? What you do is you grab their hand and you pull them up to where you are. And that, it adds more value than almost anything. If I was at the very top of that mountain and they're still below that boulder and I'm yelling, hey, you want to move a little bit that way, then go this way, and then you can try to maneuver yourself up. And if that doesn't work, go back down, go this way. I'm too far to really impact somebody. True impact comes is when you can grab somebody and bring them to your level with the hope and dream that they're going to surpass you and keep on going on their own journey, right? And so for all of us, if we're struggling with a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, I don't think I can really help someone like strategize their podcast or talk to anyone about it, you can, because you know one step more than they do. And if you do, you can add value in that way. And that goes into literally anything I've found in my life. That's helped me a lot, like overcome imposter syndrome, which has always been a struggle for me personally. So I hope that that little bonus there adds some value to somebody here. But again, my point being on this one is we want to make sure that we think about, like, can I help someone else start a show or educate people in podcasting without taking a ton of my time, right? There's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of speaking about it though, because if you're like, oh, well, that's not really my brand, still bring a photographer with you and get some pictures of you speaking in front of groups. Doing that occasionally at least is not a bad thing. Like, that can actually be very beneficial for you and for your brand. Does anybody have any question on that? I know it's kind of like a twofold thing there. Does anyone have any questions on that one before I continue here? And by the way, Linda, how am I on time? Am I okay?
Yes, sir. You are about halfway through. And we have Candy who has her hand up.
Cool. Hey, Candy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you.
Thank you. You too. This is an interesting one because, like, I'm a bookkeeper. I teach people, how to be more profitable and everything, and then this concept of helping someone start a podcast, like, I really think that's a great idea. But then how do you get someone to think about you helping them on that when you do something totally different for your actual business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm all about tying it together. And you can't always, but in your case, you might be able to talk about how to start a podcast in the most profitable way possible or the most budget-friendly way possible, right? Would that make so? What is it that you do exactly, just so I can make sure I'm not misspeaking there? What, like, your focus is?
Yeah, so I help clients with things they just have to do that they don't usually want to: bookkeeping, payroll, sales tax. But then we also teach people how to have better cash flow, be more profitable, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, here's a thought. Instead of even helping somebody start a podcast, what if you help them understand how to turn? And I don't know if you do any of the legal side or can recommend that, but like, if you have a podcast and it's somewhat business and you don't have an LLC, you're missing out on a ton of potential write-offs and stuff like that, which I believe you probably know. You could even coach someone on that and be like, hey, you need to start an LLC. Here's how you do that. And here's how you can write off some of the elements of your podcasting journey. Even little things like that again, bring them back to what you're doing. Because here's the thing, if they start making money with their podcast, doing any of these methods we talk about, they officially need you at that point, right? I'll be real. My CPA loves and hates me. I get yelled at once a quarter, but I pay him once a quarter. So he's like, thanks for feeding my family. But I wouldn't be able to do anything I'm doing without his help. And I think that's going to be the same for you, Candy. So that's kind of the idea of how to spin it and kind of merge those two things together. Does that make sense? Or is that helpful? And if it's not, that's okay.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm
thank you.
Right
I was trying to figure out how I would implement that, but I do something different, but thank you.
Yeah. See if there's a way to combine the two. There might be some little approach that you can take that no one else does. And that's when you find a true niche that can add value to people. No way. Joshua Delp. Just so y'all know, this is one of my closest friends on the planet. We live very far from each other, but oh my gosh. What's up, bro? It's good to see you, man.
Yo. Great stuff, man. This has been really value adding, especially as I'm slowly growing our podcast. One thing, I'm very interested in the idea of leveraging virtual assistants. I'm a pastor. I also own a small business. My wife owns a small business. Oh, and we got a podcast and a blog. So like, time and productivity of management is just like, that is kind of the cap we're experiencing at the moment. I've had good and bad experiences with doing VAs, and just even like, especially for the lower price point, which you mentioned, which sounds great. Especially, I'd love you to talk a little bit on one where you can source a good BA, any resources you trust, but also like, the example you mentioned, basically hire them as a prospector. Did you set up a contract? Just the way you went and structured that, and then any other ways you've leveraged BA to unleash some productivity.
Yeah.
It's a little bit off topic, but I mean, I feel like a good VA is a game changer.
Oh, for sure. It increases your profit margin if it's good, for sure. I'm gonna cover one more thing because it'll really naturally go into that. So Del, I'm gonna cover that one more thing, or Joshua. I call him Delp, just so y'all know. Like legitimately, like I was the best man at his wedding like a year and a half ago or whenever that was. Destination wedding, by the way, I recommend it. If I could go back and marry my wife again, I would do what Joshua did. So super fun. Anyway, I can't let my friendship with somebody take over here. So I'm going to get right back to that, Josh. What I want to talk about is one more idea here, and then the VA side of things will really roll into that, which virtual assistant side of things. So this last idea here that I have is what I actually do with my podcast right now, which is I turned it into a quarterly virtual event. So I produce 13 episodes through a virtual event that are my next 13 weeks of my podcast, one episode per week. And those run out the same week that I'm starting my next virtual event. And then the next 13 weeks, same thing. And I sell tickets to that virtual event. Now, some people are like, okay, well, I could just watch the replays for the next 13 weeks. You could, but when you're there, you're seeing it all live in a nice, like learning community driven environment. And beyond that, you're also able to actually connect with the guest. So the person that I'm having on my show is there to do live Q&A after we're done with the episode. And the way we do this is, in my favorite format, is I pre-record it. So no content that I'm using on my podcast is actually being recorded the day of the event. We will stream it so people can watch it. Me and the guest will do our introduction while we're there. I'll basically be like, hey, it's so good to see you here today. Wow, I just threw my mouse. I'm sorry. It's so good to see you here today. Sarah, thanks for spending this time with me. Really appreciate it. Here's what we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and dive in the video. Show the video. At the end of it, I'm like, wow, that was powerful, Sarah. We had like 15 questions come up. Let's do this live Q&A with the group. And then we roll into the next one. And so now when the day that virtual event happens, I'm already done with the next 13 weeks of content. And I do that through virtual assistants. It's not all me because I'm charging for it. The idea with that is, can I offset my production cost? And then I play with all the other things I mentioned here today. Marketing boost, skipping the line, all these different things are all elements I have. But the way I pay for my virtual assistant team and get all my content done on time is through this quarterly virtual event that I do. And it's been really powerful. And people in our community have loved it. It's just gone so well. And so I recommend, think about it. Like, is there a way you can do some sort of virtual event around your podcast, even if it's not the content itself? So forget my format. Just, can you tell all the listeners, hey, we're doing this virtual event. My favorite way to sell it, by the way, is this podcast only happens because people pay for this event. We'd love for you to be there to support the podcast and show that you're a member of this community, get to meet some other members of it. When you do that, it shows people like, okay, I'm not just giving this person money. I'm giving them money to keep the lights on, right? To make sure that this thing keeps on happening. I believe in it. And there's nothing wrong with just doing like a donate button on your podcast. That's fine. And that works for a lot of people. But taking a step further, saying, hey, donate through being part of our community and network with us and hang out with us. And we'll have our next one this day, this time. I find that doing that is it's been for us a huge community builder and a really fun format for the podcast. I'm going to jump into VAs now, but first, anyone have any questions on that format before I kind of jump into that? Sarah, my example.
Sorry. So you're saying that you pre-record the podcast, then on that virtual event, then subsequently after that, those same 13 podcasts are what your next 13 weeks look like?
Correct. Yep. Okay. So that day you'll see all 13 from start to finish of the day. And there's 2 tracks. There's like a guest track, host track, and we just switch weeks. But the next 13 weeks after it, starting the Tuesday after the Thursday event, is the first episode that we showed during the event. And then it goes on to the next one, that type of thing. Does that make sense? I haven't articulated that before. So was that all right?
Yeah, it was great. When you were saying 13 weeks leading up to your next event and then tell me about it, it obviously made sense that they wouldn't have already heard I was just making sure which
right. Yes, you're right. Yeah,
they were in.
Yes, it's a good point. It's after. So like I record it, we show it that day, and then it starts the week after it, and it just keeps on going. So thank you for bringing that up. I need to learn to articulate that a little better.
I have a question on that too. So I'm still confused by that. So do you have a guest? They're all different guests? 13 different guests?
Yeah, so my format is actually really unique. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but yes, it's all different people. I'll speak once solo. I do 2 interviews, and then it's a specific guest on the other 10. So 1 me solo, 2 like keynote interviews on either side, then 10 with just our topics that we want to cover.
So the one thing that I would suggest is that because you have so many other monetization ideas, Adam, that let's roll through as many more ideas as we can possibly get through. And then Larry, I see you have your hand up, and we'll take the last 5-10 minutes to go through questions. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I do want to make sure I definitely want to circle back to the idea of guests and then also virtual assistants, because those 2 are key elements here. But I'll share one more thing that, again, kind of random here, but is to turn your prior podcast episodes into a book. I find to be a really unique thing that you can do. And I don't mean transcribe it and then just print it out and go, right? I mean, actually turn it into something. And maybe that means working with a copywriter. There's a lot of writing assistant tools these days that you can use. Like, I don't really know AI as well as some people in this room, I'm sure, but you can use a lot of that to turn it into a coherent chapter. And that doesn't, I mean, my mind was blown when I used Capsho specifically. Like, I used it and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not this good of a writer, right? Like, it does 80% of your work, but you just do a little bit more. But yeah, you can take your prior podcast interviews and say, hey, let's make a book out of this. And the thing is, I wouldn't just say, this is a book that I wrote, right? I would say, hey, guests, do you want to be featured in this? I'm going to need help covering the costs, right? I'm going to need you to show me that you're in. It's going to be, I had somebody that did this with me. I was a co-author in a book. They needed $400 from me to basically be like, hey, show us that you're in. We're going to use your chapter. We'll send it to you. Make sure you like it. We'll ask you some follow-up questions on it, and we'll get the content. $400. And now I'm a co-author of a book. Like, that's huge, right? And like, I actually think that undersold a little bit. So my thing is, you might be able to come with a really good book on the topic that your audience is already interested in because they're listening to the podcast, in a additional resource / format they like, while paying for it through your actual guest who's like, yes, I want to be a co-author of a book. That sounds great. So actually offering some sort of book that, again, just further drives home the points that you're already making in the podcast, I think can really go a long way. This is a form, like, if you don't like written content, don't do this unless you feel that you can bring the interest from the guest and get it paid for and then have someone else do it. Because I had some people like start this one, like, Alex, I'm miserable every single day. I'm like, then don't do it. Like, if you hate it, then please just keep on talking through a mic. Like, don't actually do it. But again, if you're like, well, I think maybe I'd like a little piece of it, not all of it. If you raise the funds first through the co-authors that are your past guests, you'll be able to fund it so you can have someone else actually run the project really well. And who knows, it might end up doing really well. And the next thing you do is you actually talk about it on the podcast. Here's a book. If you enjoy this show, we put together 20 of our favorite interviews in a slightly different format that you'll really enjoy learning from. People are going to eat that up. They're going to love that. I think it's a really interesting idea. All right. Any questions on that one? And then if not, I'll get into my last monetization idea here. All right, cool. So last one here I want to talk about, and this one's a little bit more internal. So this will go back to, my goodness, I remember the name. Like Diana. Was it Diana's question on guests, right? Diane's question. Sorry, I don't even know where you are on the screen. So if I could find you, I would. But anyway, your question about guests and stuff like that. So I am not here to sell my own services. I just don't really like to do that, but I'm going to talk about it because there's a monetization strategy built into it. So Podmatch, as Linda mentioned in the beginning, is something that me and a team created, and it's a way to connect guests and hosts together for interviews. So if you are a host and you're saying, I'm looking for a guest who can talk about X, it'll automatically connect you with that guest. And from there, you can make sure that everything aligns, like you're speaking the same language, like your time available to record goes well. You can message back and forth. You never ever exchange an email if you don't want to. For lack of a better term, it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. That's what Podmatch does. One of the things that we wanted to do from day one was be able to serve people that are creators, the podcaster themselves. And because of this, we have a profit share built into it. So again, I'm not here to sell you on this. If you don't need this, don't do this one. If you're saying I need help finding guests and know where they're going to come from, this is a great solution for you to use. And in addition to that, you will actually drive revenue through it. Because again, we're basically saying, hey, we make this much. And I don't always share this number. I'll do it here because this is a trusted group, Treehouse of Trust, right? We take our profit, split it in half, and 50% of it goes back to creators. And we just divide that among the people that are actually using Podmatch to find their guests and actually releasing episodes. And that's important to us. And we always say you're not going to get rich doing that, but you should be able to offset your production cost and find your guests in a simpler, more automated way, right? And so that to us is really important, to make sure that we have a way to actually pay the creator so they can continue creating. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, like, if it's not getting out there, it doesn't matter, right? Like our knowledge inside our heads and not in a podcast isn't serving somebody, but there's a listener who needs that. So we want to make sure that we're part of helping that get out to people. So Diana, I'm sorry, I don't see you on the screen. I think you're still here though, but that's kind of the idea of finding guests, is using a tool like Podmatch, and do some research. There's other options. I'm obviously going to recommend my own, but go look around and see if there's something else that might make more sense for you. But the profit share is another monetization thing that I like to talk about. And any questions on that before I talk about VAs real quick now? Like I said, super smart group. I love it. So the virtual assistant side of things can work really well with you monetizing your podcast. And here's why: because you actually get to keep the main thing. If you're focused on being a podcaster, anytime you spend doing something like editing too much, right? Like if you're like me, I struggle with a little bit of perfectionism, right? So me editing is a terrible idea because I'm going to spend way too much time on it. So it was good for me to sub out. Some people, you might love it and you might not have that same problem, as I'll call it. So maybe it's fine for you to do. But in general, keeping the main thing is releasing podcast episodes. That's what it's about. So anything that you can find a way to delegate to a virtual assistant of some sort is going to be helpful. What I've done to make it work with virtual assistants, because I've had terrible ones and I've had really good ones. And the difference is two things. One, making sure you have a system and process in place. And this goes with all monetization, right? Like we don't want to just be like, oh, what did Alex talk about that one day? Oh, we talked about skip. Yeah, you want to skip the line, right? Like someone's gonna be like, what are you talking about? No, you want to have something here that says, okay, here's some monetization ideas. I can run through these ones. If this guest says this, I can do that, right? And then with your VA, you can say, hey, here's the things I need you to do, and have a clear expectation and make sure that their expertise follows that. So that way, when someone says, hey, I want to, let's write a book together, you can now focus on that and saying, yeah, I want to, but I spend 12 hours a day editing, right? Now you're not doing that anymore. But it all comes from setting a clear expectation and having that documented. So for me, we use Podcast SOP, which is one of our softwares, and I have 6 people on my team that run the podcast. I don't actually do anything other than check the content. I might not even do that anymore. I have to go look. See, it's on a list, so it's automated. I'm not even sure what I do with my own podcast because it's all just on there and it's assigned to people. The training is all on there. But the more of that you can do up front before hiring somebody, you can set that expectation really clearly up front. The flip side, now, some of the second thing is making sure that you're going with pre-vetted virtual assistants. You can definitely save a few dollars if you find a VA just randomly and bring them in and pay them through PayPal or something like that, or whatever it is. But I think that I don't know if I like that, because I think you have a lot higher chances of that not working out. So I pay a couple dollars extra. So I pay like $8, $9 instead of $6, right, for my virtual assistants. But I use a website, FreeUp. Let me grab a link to it real quick here. freeup.net. And they're pre-vetted, and that's what I like about it. So I'm dropping that in the chat right now. So freeup.net. And they're pre-vetted. So again, you can see their expertise. You can hire them there. They handle the payment back and forth. And I've not had any of them not work for me. Like I've kept all of them. I've been working with everyone I've been working with for years. It's on there now, as long as my expectation of what I want from them is clear. They deliver as long as I provide the direction that they need. So a lot of virtual assistants here, and by the way, like some of us, me at first, I was like, this feels wrong paying someone $8 an hour, knowing how hard they're working, because that doesn't work here. Until one day I got the great advice to say, hey, look at the conversion rate. They're in the Philippines. See how much money they're making in the Philippines. Our VAs are making what's equivalent to $200,000 here in the United States. So for me, feeling bad about only paying the $8 an hour, now I'm like, one of our guys, he bought like multiple houses and went on like 6 vacations a year when he started working with us. I'm like, shouldn't feel bad. He's living like a king and really happy with the work, right? Like, so again, don't feel like, oh, I'm just like ripping somebody off and they're not able to eat. No, they're probably living like a king where they're at because of the conversion rate of the dollar to whatever their currency might be. So I had to get over that. Now I actually know that like this, like we were able to see their lives change. Like one of our, and this is the last thing I'll share on this, but one of our virtual assistants, she was able to have her dream wedding. She sent us a video from it. And when I say her dream wedding was like, I didn't know what to expect because she's in the Philippines. That wedding here would have been easily $250,000. I mean, it had fireworks, it had choreographed dancers, lobster, shrimp, ice sculptures. I mean, everything you can imagine. I'm like, we paid for that? I'm like, we're paying her $8 an hour. I'm like, how do we pay for that? Right? It looked amazing. I wish I would have gone, honestly. But anyway, so again, with the VAs, because it is going to help us increase profit if we can free up our time to focus on what matters most. Where's our zone of genius that we can focus on, add value? What we want to do is have a clear expectation what we want them to do. And on the flip side, we want to make sure that they are pre-vetted by somebody else saying, this person is going to do a good job for you. So you can keep your hands out of all the mess of it, right?
So I think it's a great idea to actually form a book out of the podcast. And I was thinking, and I think Linda alluded to that it's just a transcript, or do you go back and make changes? Do you get their approval? I mean, I was kind of looking more for the process of doing that, because it sounds like a simple way to generate the generate the content, and then it's kind of the best of the best. So you're really consolidating all the best episodes, and I would think that'd be very attractive to your listening audience. So I just want to get a little more color on how you actually structure that.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this. So first off, if you did like a full-on transcript, it'd be longer than the Bible. I don't know if anyone's going to want that, right? But what you can do is say, okay, the best 3 questions that this guest answered, or the best piece of this interview was this 20-minute segment, or that's still too long, 10-minute segment, right? Because when you convert to words, it'd be a lot more. Because you want it to, my advice, by the way, like, you don't want it to be too long. Like if it's an interview style book, it might get a little bit repetitive. So you want to keep it somewhat short and pull out just the best of each of them. I mean, even like, oh man, Tools of Titans. Who is that? Tim something? I'm blanking on who that was. Anyway, somebody here definitely. Tim Ferriss. Thanks, Joshua. I saw your lips. Appreciate it. Yeah. So Tim Ferriss, even they're really short. Like, and these people were like the smartest people on the planet, but he just knew like, hey, I don't need all the information. I just need something here that's going to really pack a punch and add value. So I think pulling out the best of each interview is great. And then you do that part proactively, right? And you can do that through transcripts and stuff like that, but send that to the guest after they've confirmed they want to be in, and say, hey, what should we add, subtract, change? Like, what should we do a little bit different here, and figure out what's really going to pack a punch? Because they might be like, you know what, I shared that, but if I could add a little bit there and almost even make it like a quote, say like I think it'd be really interesting if you said not from the interview and had like almost bullet point in a different color, and basically like an addition from the guest talking about this, like, hey, by the way, also I've discovered this after the interview or something, just to make it feel like, okay, this is truly a bonus that we're getting here. That type of thing goes a long way. But that would be my thoughts. Start with the transcript, pull out the best of the best, run it, collaborate back and forth with that guest, and then make it a truly impactful chapter.
Guest is an expert in their area, and you're pulling the best out. To the extent that they may have a program that they're selling, do you also get an affiliate commission from that as created through the podcast?
Hadn't thought about that, but it's a good idea. At the end, put an affiliate link. Why not? That can't hurt. I mean, if they're already going to be able to plug it at the end and someone wants more, then yeah, might as well. I think that's brilliant. Did not think about that one. I will bring that up next time I talk about this topic. So thanks for that, Larry.
No problem. I only won 20%. No.
All right. And Elise said, Alex, are you saying that your VA actually edits your podcast?
Yes, I have someone who edits my podcast. Yep.
All right. And Lindsay said, does the discount go towards upgrading the account type, if applicable? And
I see it in the chat now. Sorry, I wasn't following the chat.
No,
so
it was
just
I'm sorry, I had put that in. I was just curious. I thought I was doing it to the whole group, and it wasn't. It was Linda. But no, because I know that there's different like levels within. I didn't know if that applies. It wasn't necessarily a question for me. It was for everybody, but just was wondering about that as well.
Yeah, I'm not the expert on that side of things. I delegate a lot of my work. Alicia's the one to ask, my wife, who handles that side of things. But I think that as long as you're using the Leadership Global, it should automatically apply, I believe. And sometimes we have some software changes.
That the discount for Leadership Global, yes, there's a 45% discount to any Podmatch membership that you join. So you can join as a podcaster, as a podcast guest, or both. And so depending on what you purchase within Podmatch, you receive a 45% discount if you use the Leadership Global code that Alex was kind enough to create for the members of Leadership Global. So we're extending that to everyone who is joining today's call if you're not already a member of Podmatch.
And real quick on that, if you're a legacy member, you've been with it for a while, you won't, if that discount is more than your current, like when you got in, you're not going to see it, because it's not gonna be like, hey, you pay 50% more. Because some people have been with us for like 3 years and we launched for like $5. We don't know, right? So it's not going to like bump it way up. So that's the disclaimer, which we just recently discovered.
All right. Love that. Okay. Mike said you can load your transcripts into Chat GPT or any kind of similar AI service and ask it to actually summarize and pull out highlighted quotes. So that could be really helpful too.
Yeah, that stuff blows my mind. Like I was saying earlier, that's some real interesting stuff. Let's put it that way. I've played around with it a little bit. I use it to help me with titles and stuff like that. So any AI is going to do 80% of what we can do. So we have to just keep that in mind. It always needs the human touch. And anyway, I like to believe that's just how God made us. So we have to be involved somehow.
I will tell you that we are right at time. And Alex, I want to take just a moment to thank you, to acknowledge